There's a moment during the informal walkthrough of her new exhibition at the Art Gallery of Ontario, Facing the Monumental, when a talked-out Rebecca Belmore has a moment to herself. As the group shuffles forward and she pauses for a breath, I ask her what exactly to call this outsized display of her storied career. Retrospective, isn't it? I'm not old enough for that yet, she blurts, with an easy laugh. Let's just call it a survey, I think, sister. 2010, part of Rebecca Belmore career survey at the Ago. Bernard Weil, Toronto Star. Rebecca Belmore with her piece rising to the occasion. 1987 to 91, part of her career survey at the Ago. Bernard Weil, Toronto Star. Fountain. 2005, made as Canada's official entry for the Venice Biennale, is part of Rebecca Belmore's career survey at the Ago. Bernard Weil, Toronto Star. Pelican Falls. 2017, is among the most recent works in Rebecca Belmore's Facing the Monumental, a career survey of the iconic Indigenous artist's work. Bernard Weil, Toronto Star, The Named and Unnamed, 2002, in which Rebecca Belmore performed a vigil for missing and murdered women on Vancouver's downtown east side, is part of her career survey at the Ago. Bernard Weil, Toronto Star, Rebecca Belmore, by Njiyangonji, From Inside, 2017, installed on Philippapu Hill in Athens. Indeed, Belmore, at 58, would be just arriving at what the art world calls mid-career, solidly established and ready to build further on a hard-earned reputation as perhaps the country's most renowned Indigenous artist, whether of her generation and any other. At the same time, for those embedded in the Canadian art world, it can feel like Belmore has always been there, with her singular voice of visceral dissent demanding to be heard. That's as much testament to the power of her work as her longevity. Indigenous art, now a central part of the country's cultural identity, might never have found its way from the margins had she not been there to lead it forward. Belmore, who is Anishinaabe from the Lac-Seul First Nation, would surely acquiesce, deflecting credit to trailblazers like Carl Beam, Daphne Ojig and Robert Houle, whose own work threw down a gauntlet for recognition and respect that others, like her, have picked up and carried on. But as an Indigenous woman working mostly in performance, Belmore has carved a uniquely provocative space. Almost always present, most often under strain, she embodies struggle, quite literally, in a way a painting or an installation simply cannot. Article continued. Bellevitt gives her work a presence riveting in its discomforts. Facing the Monumental crackles with such moments. Fountain, a video piece made for the 2005 Venice Biennale, where Belmore was Canada's flag bearer, a term, I have no doubt, she'd find amusing, fills the fifth-floor galleries with turbulent sound gushing out from its own space and into the entire exhibition as Belmore, on-screen, struggles and flails in a black-watered lake. Redmore, Ago offers a broad and unapologetic take on Canadian art. Sounds of strain erupt, too, from the small space housing The Named and Unnamed, the 2007 video installation made from her 2002 performance on Vancouver's downtown east side. Belmore begins by scrubbing clean a patch of street on her hands and knees before donning a red dress that, scrap by scrap, she nails to a pole and shreds by yanking herself free. Each nail stood in for a missing woman listed on the RCMP's task force list of the time, compiled. Finally, once the serial nature of the disappearances were acknowledged, Belmore calls out their names, each one an unearthly, pain-riven howl, before slumping, sweaty and spent, against a pickup truck. This is the Belmore we know. Certainly, her first fiery performances in the late 1980s, forming the foundation of her long career, many of which are included on a pair of monitors here, allowing you to pick and choose. What Facing the Monumental does, though, and powerfully, is resituate Belmore less in the visceral and more broadly in the poetic, tracing the long arc of a career that's as often oblique and evocative as it has been frank, visceral and intense. I was struck by a recent work, Pelican Falls, in which Belmore, captivated by a collection of snapshots taken in the 1950s of a group of boys from the Pelican Lake Residential School, was moved to a poetic gesture. The boys, dressed head to toe in heavy denim jumpsuits despite the summer heat, huddle on an outcrop over the lake. With their school uniforms resembling prison wear, Belmore veered from outrage to what I read as hope, a vast flow of indigo denim ripples like a fast-moving stream along a narrow gallery corridor, the form of a child rising up from its midst. Nearby, a video screen completes, for me, the picture, a boy, seen from behind, dousing his head with water, over and over, as though a purification rite, from the ugliest of horrors, something truly beautiful, transformation despite the trauma. Article continued. It's just one instance of Belmore using a particular narrative to craft a piece that transcends the specific, a subtle defiance, carefully plied, that shifts mere idea into that magical realm we call art. Indeed, despite her fiery reputation, facing the monumental forms a cogent argument about how open-ended and non-pedantic Belmore's work has always been. It also clarifies the breadth of Belmore's interest. A pair of new pieces, tower, a stack of shopping carts tipped on end, 20 feet high, supported by a column of clay and tarpaulin, a ragged canvas stiff and ghostly, to appear draped over a kneeling figure, were made on a recent return to Vancouver, Belmore's home for a dozen years. Struck by the widening rift between rich and poor and the exploding homelessness crisis, she made the two pieces both as tribute and complaint, a stack of shopping carts, the de facto mobile home of the homeless, stacked like a condo tower, a tarp their only shelter, and most prized possession. It brings into view a complication in the recent focus on Indigenous contemporary art. It always struck me as strange when people assume that Indigenous artists are only speaking about Indigenous things. Belmore said, her lips curling slightly into a wry grin. Or that Indigenous issues aren't universal issues, added Wanda Nanabish, the show's curator and Belmore's longtime collaborator. When asked if she felt the world had finally caught up with her, Belmore told a story about speaking recently to a class at the University of Victoria. One of the students asked me, "Don't you get tired of always representing your people?" She laughed. "I don't represent my people. I'm not a chief. I'm an artist. But there is a responsibility there and one I take very seriously." She smiled. "I don't mind being an Indigenous artist and a non-Indigenous artist." Indeed, Belmore need not look far to find kinship, Indigenous or not, and especially now. In 2017, Belmore was invited to make a piece for Documenta 14, the once in 5 years international art exhibition widely regarded to the world's most significant. Taking place concurrently in Kassel, Germany, its longtime home, and in Athens, Greece, Belmore fastened onto the moment. In the port, she observed, amid the luxury cruise liners, were long piers crammed shoulder to shoulder with tents to receive the boatloads of refugees now constantly drifting into Greek waters. Her gesture was simple and poignant, a tent, now a symbol of the landless and the dispossessed, carved from Greek marble extracted from the same quarries used to build the Acropolis. Belmore's work, by Ngiyangonji, from inside, was installed on a hill outside the city, facing the Acropolis itself. It's now planted in the Agios Gallery Italia, which replaces its intended confrontational site specificity with an inadvertent new one, beside the modernist icons of Henry Moore and down the hall from the Thompson Collection's hoary Group of 7 display. It's an easy read, I suppose, at least at first glance, for millennia of European old guard thinking, an ancient symbol of human achievement, civilization at its peak, viewed from afar by the contemporary world's most commonplace image of transience and dispossession. What matters, I think, is its weight, just as permanent and steadfast, viewing old guard privilege from afar while refusing to look away. Rebecca Belmore has been facing such monuments all her career, staring them down with poetic determination all the while. This is how old monuments crumble, and new ones are made. Rebecca Belmore, Facing the Monumental opens at the Art Gallery of Ontario on July 12 and continues to October 21. See ago.ca for information. Murray White is the Star's art critic based in Toronto. Follow him on Twitter, @UntitledToronto.